Hey, warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson. Now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast, we've got an excellent podcast for you. It's another conference preview edition as today we look at the WCC. A man that has joined me for the WCC preview edition so many times. That would be one of our good friends in Connor Ope. Does amazing work over at eCheckCBB. He's going to be joining me in segment number 2. We're going to be chatting with him about what we can all expect from this fine conference. Some of the newcomers as well. Seattle's new to the conference. We still have Oregon State along with Washington State from a season ago. We've seen a few coaching changes, so we've got a lot to talk about with Connor in segment number 2. He always does such a great job on this conference. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector finish for this wonderful WCC. And here in segment number 1, we're going to take a look at the betting trends and just the styles of play that we've got in this conference. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM. The naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire into whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds whenever and wherever they want. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. And how about if we get down to business and take a look at a WCC that, out of all the conferences in college basketball, I feel like it might be one of the biggest melting pots of styles right now. You just take a look at the overall pace of play that you've got in this conference. You've got a few super up-tempo teams. Washington State being the fastest one out of them all. Gonzaga typically has that moniker. They were a little bit slower during the Drew Timmy days, but still typically a fast team. They were 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so very much an up-tempo team. But Washington State, 29th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They bring in David Riley from Eastern Washington, so they are very much looking to blast it. San Diego, they have been playing quite up-tempo ever since Steve Lyman took over. They were 36th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Those are really your main three teams that they do like to run it and gun it. And then from there, you're going to have some more, shall we say, mid-tempo teams, like Portland is number 94 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They play a little bit faster than normal, but it's not something where it's going to be like harebrained, herky-jerky, or anything like that. Now, you've obviously got a team that plays super-duper slowly, and they played a little bit faster last season, but St. Mary's is always that team that plays very slow, very under control. Last year, they were 357th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and you got a few other teams that they do like to slow it down a little bit more. The addition of Oregon State, that led to quite a bit of that, 332nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pepperdine under a new regime, Pacific under a new regime after they were traditional teams that you knew what you could expect out of them, especially Pepperdine being a bit of an up-tempo team under Lorenzo Romar. Now they turned things over, and they were more of a mid-tempo team last year, 139th in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific was 199th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and then Santa Clara, always a team that likes to gun it a little bit more, 75th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So you've got a few more fast teams and slow teams, but certainly you do have a nice blend of styles, and three-point shooting really does reign supreme in this conference. You did have Gonzaga be a little bit more hit or miss last season, but you can tell that there's a lot of teams in this conference that they are just looking to bomb it from three-point range. Washington State was one of the main of them, 56th in the country with regards to their overall three-point shooting percentage. Gonzaga, who I just mentioned, they were a bunch that struggled with their three-point shooting away from home. Shot 37.8% from three at home, 33.2% away from home, 91st in all of college basketball. St. Mary's had a little bit of success from the outside as well. We know them for being a team that's just rough and tumble down low, number 1 in the country in terms of their rebound percentage, but for St. Mary's, they were able to pop it a little bit from 253rd in all of college basketball, much better 2 years ago when they had a little bit more of that main backcourt with Ada Mahaney and company out there, but Oregon State was certainly a team that was bombing it from three-point range, 63rd in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Now, lots of good home court environments out there. Like, you notice with Oregon State, they shot 39.2% from three-point range at home, 32.4% in a road/neutral court environment. You found that with quite a few schools. Santa Clara was actually your best three-point shooting team in the conference. 38.2% is what they were able to shoot from three-point range, and you're going to notice this. There's not a ton of teams that are like heat-seeking missiles schools in terms of generating turnovers in this conference, so that allows for a lot of crisp, clean offense. Gonzaga, for the fourth straight season, they were in the top 5 in the country with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. They were number 2 in all of college basketball, but you saw quite a few other teams that were rock solid. Santa Clara was 19th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Herb Sendek has done a solid job there. Oregon State was up to 22nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Obviously, you've got teams that they form their identity on defense in this conference, like a St. Mary's, but still, they were 44th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Like the WCC, it's not like on par with a power conference or anything like that, but some very good rock solid offenses out there in this conference. The Dons of San Francisco were 93rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Washington State was 100th, so do it have a lot of teams doing a solid job there. And then I feel like the best teams in this conference are the ones that rebound, and that's where you really do find the divide between the haves and the have-nots. St. Mary's, number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of rebound percentage. They grab 57.2% of rebounds, so if a game has 100 rebounds in it, they grabbed on average 57.2. No other team in college basketball had a better rebound percentage. Guess who your next best team was? Gonzaga. Gonzaga, 23rd in the country in terms of rebound percentage. Santa Clara finished towards the top of the conference. They were 27th in the country with regards to their rebound percentage. And then as teams get worse and worse, their rebound percentage gets worse and worse. That's what we find with regards to this conference. And with Washington State, that was a little bit of a killer for them. 179th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. If they had Cedric Coward out there, who knows, might be looking at a little bit of a different story there. Like Oregon State, they were 31st in the country in terms of rebound percentage. They were another team that was pretty rock solid, but the teams that have been finishing towards the bottom, like Pacific, 217th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. Pepperdine, 245th in the country. Portland, 303rd in the country. Those are the teams that they really had a rough go of it. San Diego was 289th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. And then you take a look at the betting trends in this conference, and certainly you've got a lot of teams that find themselves as big giant underdogs, and I do think that it's fascinating with this conference. Not a lot of travel out there. Most of these teams out there in the great state of California, obviously with the addition of Oregon State along with Washington State, a little bit more spread out, and then you've got Portland, that's obviously out there in the great state of Oregon, but that leads to a little bit less in terms of stress on the body in terms of travel, and your best cover team was actually Oregon State, 20-12 against the spread last season. And then you had quite a few teams that they weren't necessarily super duper profitable, but they weren't awful. Like St. Mary's was actually a worse against the spread team at 14-20 against the spread. They were having a little bit of a tough time with their defense towards the beginning part of the season, really hunkered down towards conference play. And then Gonzaga, 15-19-1 against the spread. Your top 2 teams in the conference were actually your worst cover teams. And then Loyola Marymount Pacific, 14-17 respectively against the spread. Pepperdine, Washington State, they were both 16-17-1 and 16-18 against the spread. Portland, a break even, 15-15. Santa Clara, 18-16. San Diego, 17-15. Now you're going to be adding in there Seattle, which, by the way, the addition of Seattle is going to be adding even more defense. They were a top 50 team in all of college basketball with regards to their points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 225 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. And for this Seattle Redhawks team, they obviously aren't going to cause for a whole heck of a lot more travel because they're based out there right by old Gonzaga. But that said, for Seattle, 229th in the country last season in terms of total possessions per game. So that might lead to just a little bit more defense, but underdogs were really able to reign supreme in the WCC last year, as you had Oregon State go 6-4 against the spread as an underdog. St. Mary's, they went 13-12 against the spread as a dog. Even the likes of San Diego, 14-12 against the spread as a dog. Portland, 11-10 against the spread as an underdog. The teams that really struggled were Washington State and Pepperdine, 10-13-1 against the spread for Pepperdine. Washington State was 4-10 against the spread. Things just really spiraled out of control with regards to the injuries, but Santa Clara was 5-4 against the spread. And then Gonzaga, they were 0-0-1 against the spread as an underdog. That lone game coming against Houston, so can't really consider that a success or a failure. They covered 0% of their games as an underdog, but they failed to not cover 0% of their games as an underdog as well. But I was talking about it in terms of the travel not being too robust in this conference. You have most of these teams be above 500 against the spread on the road. Oregon State was 4-6 against the spread on the road. Loyola Marymount, Washington State both 4-7 against the spread on the road, and Pepperdine 4-8-1 against the spread on the road. But St. Mary's 7-3, Portland 8-4, Santa Clara 7-4, 7-5 for San Diego. Gonzaga and San Francisco both went 5-4 and 5-4-1 respectively, and then Pacific, they go 8-7 against the spread on the road. And if you're taking a look at a totals landscape, because you do have some very up-tempo teams and some very low-tempo teams. It causes for a lot of intrigue, but this was an over-conference last year. You only had 2 teams have more than 50% of their games go under the total. St. Mary's was your obvious under team. 12 overs, 21 unders, and a push. That should come to not too much of a surprise to a lot of people. Pacific, 15 overs, 16 unders. Loyola Marymount break even, 15, 15, and 1 to the over. And then you had Santa Clara go 18 overs, 16 unders. Pepperdine, 18 overs, 15 unders, and a push. Same for San Francisco. And then Washington, 19 overs, 15 unders. San Diego, 18 overs, 14 unders. Gonzaga, 21 overs, 13 unders, and a push. Portland, 19 overs, 11 unders. Oregon State, 22 overs, 10 unders. We did notice that a lot of teams had a little bit of a rough go of it in terms of their defense when they went away from home. In the three-point shooting divide, that was a little bit of something to be taking note of as you just take a look at the way that these teams were able to put it up. Every single one of these teams at home, they were above 50% to the over when they were at home. The three-point shooting from home to road in this conference, it feels like it's very, very immense and it's very big, as your top over team at home was Washington State, 11-3 to the over, and then every other team, they were just putting money for you. San Diego, Santa Clara, San Francisco, 9 overs to 8 unders at home. 8 overs and 7 unders for Pepperdine and St. Mary's with a push thrown in there as well. Gonzaga, 8 overs to 6 unders at home with a push. You had Pacific, 8 overs, 6 unders. Oregon State, 10 overs, 7 unders. Loyola Marymount, 9 overs, 6 unders, and a push. And then Portland, 9 overs, 5 unders at home. So this is a very unique conference. It's a fun one, and it's one that Connor Ope does a great job of being able to break down. He's going to be joining me next. We're going to take a look at all 12 of these rosters and so much more with him right here on Custom Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast, the WCC Conference Preview Edition. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. It's the WCC Conference Preview Edition, and this man has joined me for at the very least 5 of these, if not more. We've got our good friend Connor Hope aboard. He does such an incredible job. Take a look at this great game of college basketball. He's over there at Heat Check CBB doing an incredible job on that front. Additionally, I know that he's been helping out with some work over at Sleepers Media, a few other platforms as well as Connor. He does such an incredible job of taking a look at everything out there. I know that he's a Gonzaga grad, so he very much knows a lot about the WCC. He does a great job taking a look at all these West Coast schools, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at HoopsHopeCBB. And Connor, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always great to join you. I love doing the WCC and the Big West. It's going to be a great time.
Yep, it is going to be a great time, and it's going to be interesting to see if some of these bottom teams can rise up, because I take a look at the conference right now, and I think that Pepperdine might get lost in the shuffle a little bit more with Pepperdine. This is year number 2 under a new coaching regime, and they bring back a 6'10" combo player, Danilo Dozic, who is able to pop it from 3 at 6'10", and if they could get a clean bill of health for Javon Cooley, the transfer from Marist, that'll be big. But I do take a look at this roster, a little bit of a lack of depth here, and a few international men of mystery as well, which I think could cause for some struggles for Pepperdine this season.
Pepperdine, they're a pretty shallow team, pretty young too, right? Javon Cooley, if he's healthy, is a senior. Everyone else who figures to contribute to this roster is a freshman or a sophomore. What you're looking at is just, it's a team that's going to have some growing pains with a coach that came into a pretty rough situation. Danilo Dozic played like 18 minutes a game last year. Didn't really have a high usage. He's going to be their big man. You've got some more size on the wings, some pretty small guards. But I think this is going to be a team that is probably a year out from being competitive in the middle of the conference, right? They're really young. If they can start to put it together, if some of their younger players can start to put it together this season, they're not going to compete for anything this year. But I think they have enough talent on this roster where you can't just skip over them when you're preparing for your week of basketball, right? But especially if Cooley's not fully healthy, I think they're going to be kind of subjugated to the bottom of the conference. They have enough young talent where if they can keep that core going into next year, they'll be competitive in a year or two.
Yep, and I think that this is going to be something similar for Portland as well. As the first year or two under Shante Leggins, it really felt like they were building something. Ever since then, it's been quite a few steps back, and they do bring in a guy in Riley Parker, who I think is going to be relatively rock solid. He played some solid minutes over at St. Francis, that team that made the NCAA tournament last year, and if they can get some development out of their 7-footer and Jeremiah Belsager Webb, there's a little bit of upside there, but they're really relying upon someone like a Jay Alvarez who comes on over from Ryder to give the team good contributions. And as we know, Ryder wasn't even really a good team out there in the Metro Atlantic. And I look at Portland, and I mean, there was a lot of optimism on my end from them a few years ago, and it just feels like it's faded over the last few years.
I think Portland's biggest issue has been roster turnover pretty much year over year. They've been relying on, under Leggins, they've been relying on a lot of new faces. This year, maybe a little bit less, but it's still, there's a lot of roster turnover. I think the key for Portland, and I think it's been the key for Portland for a few years, is how well their bigger wings, specifically Matus Hronsky from Duquesne, how well he can do at stretching the floor, being an outside threat. He's improved his shooting kind of year over year, but even last year he was just under 35%. If he can bump that up to 35, 36% and really be a threat from the outside and be able to score inside too. I know last year he struggled a little bit there. He needs to be a big piece, a much bigger piece on this roster than he was at Duquesne. But if he can do that, they'll be competitive. They'll be pesky. Last year, they started off rough in WCC play, but they finished the regular season going 5-3. So they finished relatively strong before being knocked off in the conference tournament. I think they'll be middle of the pack. Like, I think that Shante Leggins is a good coach. It's a tough school to recruit to, and there's been a lot of turnover there.
Yeah, there has been a lot of turnover, and for Portland, it felt like they had a really good core with Leggins bringing over those guys from Eastern Washington. Now they're gone, and now they need to try to be able to find a little bit of inroads, and they need to find their identity. As joining me on the show, we've got Connor Hope, who does such great work over at HXCBB, joining me for the WCC Conference Preview Edition here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And for Washington State, you want to talk about a team that just had a rough end of the season last year. Things were really looking good for them at the beginning, and they were actually doing a good job of holding down the fort without Cedric Coward towards the beginning part of the season, but now you do lose a lot of those rock solid guys like Lawan Watts enters into the transfer portal. Nate Calmezzi, he's out as well. They do bring back a few guys like Thomas Thraston. I always get that name mixed up, but that said, Thomas, he comes over from Iceland. He was able to give the team some nice production towards the back half of the season. Ryards Vavers was able to see some nice production as well. They need these guys at solid minutes towards the back half of the season, in my opinion, to really step up. And then Jerome Morton, who comes on over after he spent some time in the Ohio Valley Conference, figures to be a big cog in the backcourt as well.
Yeah, I think with Washington State, one of the biggest things for them is just, look, last year it wasn't just Cedric Coward. Isaiah Watts was out for a good portion of the season, and they never got back on track when he came back. And they really could have used him in that backcourt because outside of Nate Calmezzi, like, he was the other guard. Really, towards the end of last year, they were relying a lot on guys like Lawan Watts to play that kind of second guard position, that first guard position with Nate Calmezzi out. He's not a one guard, Lawan Watts, but Isaiah Watts could have played that. Look, this is a team, again, I think they'll be better. I think people are overestimating how much this turnover is probably going to hurt them. They bring in Casey Jones. He knows the system. He played for Eastern Washington, so he played under this coaching staff with David Riley. So I think him, Thrasterson, to me, are the two biggest pieces to this team. I think the one you have to look out for, who impressed me last year, and if he can get more minutes this year, he could be a solid piece on a top half team in the WCC, is Ndie Okafor. The Cal transfer came in, only played, I think, like 15 minutes a game, something like that. But shoots 62% from three. He's a really solid rebounder, really solid shot blocker. And when he's going up against some of these teams outside the kind of top two, top three, I think his size, not necessarily from a height perspective, but just from a 6'9", 235 size, could give some of these other teams in the WCC some issues.
Yep, certainly. They do have some size. They do have some versatility, and hopefully for their sake, they can get a clean bill of health, because that was something that really hurt them last year. And And I feel like this has become the de facto number 3 team in the conference over the last few years. We'll see if that stays. That would be the Dons of San Francisco. Now, for San Francisco, they do lose quite a bit of that backcourt that was so rock solid from last season, but Tyrone Riley was able to have himself a really nice year last year. He's going to be coming back after he was able to supply the team with like 9.5 points, 6 boards per game, so that's going to be big for them. Guillermo Diaz-Graham, a true 7-footer, comes over after he spent the beginning part of his career over at Pittsburgh. Duo Newberry is going to be back from a season ago. Vukasa Masic, obviously he's got familiarity with the conference being over at Portland, and I look at San Francisco with Ryan Beasley back. Certainly the backcourt turnover hurts his team, but the way that Riley was able to play as a freshman last year, I think gives this team a lot of promise.
I wouldn't fault anyone looking at the roster talent for San Francisco, ranking San Francisco in the top 2 of this conference. You mentioned it, Tyrone Riley is going to be a star. I think Ryan Beasley at the end of last year showed that he could be a star if they called upon him. Efficiency needs to improve, especially the consistency in his efficiency. But when you're looking at the WCC tournament, look, he went 4 of 8. He scored 29 points against Washington State. In the WCC tournament, he scored 13, but he went 2 of 6 against Gonzaga. He went 3 of 6 against Utah Valley in the postseason. If you look at the last month and a half of Ryan Beasley last year, he's set up, I think, to be a star in this conference, especially if not this year, where he might take on a secondary role. Next year, he could definitely be a primary scoring guard in this conference. And don't count out Mookie Cook. Like, I think his transfer to San Francisco really adds just another stretch wing who can play opposite Riley in that starting 5, and just you have those two with the athleticism, the promise, and the ceiling that they both have. Like, this is a talented roster that people are rightfully high on heading into this season.
Yep, San Francisco has also proven that they're relatively coach-proof as well. I mean, they lost a coach that just won a national title last year in Todd Golden, and they still been able to maintain as a rock-solid number 3, number 4 program in the WCC, which I find that to be impressive as well. And I mentioned one Diaz-Graham brother. How about if we take a look at the team that got the other Diaz-Graham brother? That would be Oregon State, as Ore Diaz-Graham. He comes on over from Pittsburgh, and then you've got a team that has a lot of turnover. They lose their top 3 scorers from a season ago, but they bring back Josiah Lake along with Isaiah Sy, and I like what they did in the transfer portal. If Tyler Cochran could be the guy that we saw 2 years ago before missing last year due to injury, there's upside there. Noah Ammenhauser is a guy that stands over 7 feet tall that comes in from Coastal Carolina, and Oregon State, they had a lot of turnover in the offseason, but I thought that they did a good job with their transfer portal hauls, and this feels like a very balanced team, unlike a season ago where it felt like they were really relying a little bit more on the 3-point shot.
This Oregon State team, the biggest concern I have is that I feel like Wayne Tinkle as a coach will find those big wings, whether it's his son, whether it's Michael Ratai. I know Parsifala played the 5, but he was not as big, but he finds those like 6'8" to 6'10" players that can get inside, get gritty. Ratai could kind of step out to the 3-point line if needed. He had Nate Kings shooting 44% from 3. Lelavicius also as a freshman shooting 38% from 3. Losing all of that and then bringing in a roster where your front court is outside of Diaz-Graham, which, let's be honest, he's also a question mark, right? He played 6 minutes a game or something for Pittsburgh. You're relying a lot on small guards, especially in the scoring attack. You're going to be relying on a lot of small guards. And I just worry that some of these teams, the Gonzagas, the St. Mary's, the San Francisco's, the Santa Claras, are just going to have a little bit more talent on the perimeter. And you can't take advantage maybe as much of some of their bigs not being able to step out to the 3-point line. Because I think that's where Oregon State excelled was, you had to have Graham Ike or Braden Huff step out to the 3-point line a lot of the time with Ratai. You had to, when St. Mary's was playing their 2 big lineup, they also had to step out to the 3-point line. They went 0-2 against St. Mary's, but they scored 64 on a really good defense in the final game of the year. So I just worry about this team if they can't find that kind of stretch 4, stretch 5 that can consistently shoot 3-pointers.
Yeah, but I think that that is going to be a little bit of an issue for them as Oregon State, not quite the three-point shooting team, it appears, as they were a season ago. As joining me on the show, we've got Connor Hope. He does amazing work over at eCheck CBB, joining me for the WCC Conference Preview Edition here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this feels like a put-up or shut-up year for Steve Lavin. Year number one, he brought in a lot of guys via the transfer portal from the Pac-12. Didn't necessarily work out. Last few years, they really didn't touch the portal at all. This year, they brought in dudes. They bring in Dominic Built-Ford Tough, double-figure scorer from Southern Utah. Tonari Lane, who was the go-to guy over at, I believe it was Georgia State. I always get Georgia State and Georgia Southern confused. They bring back KJ Bradley. Tyler Johnson is a guy that began his career over at Louisville. Tim Moore is someone that's able to give you some production coming in from NJIT. They brought in talent via the portal. Bradley Awazaro, he was over at Georgetown, UAB, a few other places as well. And I think the question is there going to be chemistry? Because I look at the roster and talent alone should get this team at the very minimum to the middle of the conference. But the question is, can they gel?
Yeah, it's can they gel? And I'm worried about the coaching of Steve Lavin. And the reason why I say that is because I think I mentioned this with you before too. Offense can have a lot to do with talent, right? If you don't have the talent on offense, your offense can just be bad. But I feel like a lot of defense is coaching, right? And coming into San Diego, Steve Lavin had, when he was at UCLA, he had 2 of his 7 seasons where he ranked outside the top 60 on defense, just a defense per KenPom. At St. John's, he had 1 season where he ranked outside the top 60 on defense per KenPom. He had 0 seasons where he ranked outside the top 170. So outside like the top half, he was a top half defensive coach every single season as a head coach per KenPom. And then at San Diego in his last 3 years, 344th, 204th. So you saw a little bit of improvement, 256th last year. That's something that no amount of talent in the world can fix if it's not fixed with chemistry and coaching. I think he has the talent offensively to fix a lot of the issues that they had last year. Specifically, a lot of these players who were maybe more inefficient shooters. I think if you put them around each other and they can space the floor and not be like the sole shooter on their teams, they could improve. They have some more size too behind Diop. They have not a lot, but they have some more size on the wings. Dominique Ford is 6'5". Lane is 6'5". I think where they're going to hurt, which is where they've hurt the last 3 seasons though, is just they've given up so many open threes and they've had a rough go of it stopping points in the paint. So if they want to compete, their offense can be good, but their defense is something that I'm going to have to see it before I start to believe it.
Yep, I am right there with you, and I do think that they've got a lot more talent than they've had in past years, but the question is it all going to be able to come together? As joining me on the show, we do have Connor Hope of eCheck CBB, and this team, I think, is one of the more interesting wild cards in the conference. That'd be Loyola Marymount, because it feels like Stan Johnson has been able to do a solid job, but hasn't necessarily been able to get this Loyola Marymount team over the hump. I love the addition of Tanner Thomas, guy that was over at Sacred Heart shooting about 37.5% from 3, 14.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Nikel Shelton was a really good producer over at Eastern Illinois. Rodney Brown is an upside guy that comes in from Virginia Tech. It feels like a team that doesn't necessarily have a ton of depth, but I like the overall pieces that they bring in. Aaron McBride is someone that is going to be back from a season ago, along with Jan Vide. Vide was able to see a little bit of production as well. They're going to need him to take a stride forward. They lose a lot of the production from last year. I like the transfers that they bring in, but I could see this going one of 2 ways, where they boom and they blossom, or this could be a bunch that maybe they just don't have enough depth to be able to make that push that they want to this year.
This is a program that's been up and down. What I will say about Stan Johnson is that he's been, at least of their last, 3 to 4 coaches, I think the coach where even if the season doesn't go the way that you would like, you watch the way this LMU team plays and you're like, that's a team that could be good. I think that's the reason why, honestly, he's still there. And I don't think there's not a question about why he's still the head coach. He's been there 5 seasons, but he's been solid and he has had 2 really good years at the helm. But I agree with you. I think this is a team that is going to have to look for that primary scoring option. Vide is not the shooter. He is very athletic. He can attack the paint. It's not even that he can't shoot. He just doesn't shoot. I think he uses his athleticism more just to get to the rim. They have a lot of wing depth. We'll see how it goes in the front court in terms of competing with those top teams in the conference. But this is a team, again, like if you're talking about after those top three, top four teams, LMU is going to be right in the mix with an Oregon State or a Washington State. I feel like they're well coached. The question is whether the talent is there to take that next step.
Yep, I do agree with you there, and I do think that it's going to be so interesting to watch them for this upcoming season. And I think that Pacific is a team that has a little bit of upside as well, because for Pacific, they've been bad for a long time. Let's call it what it is, but I like the haul that they have coming in here. TJ Wainwright was a relatively solid scorer over at Long Beach State last season. You've got a guy in Alexis Marmojoles, hopefully I said that correctly, coming in from the Southland Conference over at Lamar, where he was a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. Dom Capriati really didn't play last year, but 2 years ago, solid three-point shooter over at Houston Christian. Casey Abikwe was able to see some starts a few seasons ago over at Oregon State. It feels like they've done a good job of revamping this roster. It's pretty much completely flushed from a season ago. Season number 2 under a coach that actually comes in from Canadian basketball, so obviously it was a little bit of a changeover for Mr. Dave Smart, but I did take a look at this Pacific team, and I don't think that they're competing for any sort of conference title here or anything like that, but I think that they take some strides forward from where they were last year.
Loved the hire of Smart. The players he's brought in maybe fit his style a little bit more. This is a team that they don't shoot a ton of threes, but they're not afraid of them. Like to get to the free throw line a little bit more. They're not going to attack the offensive boards, but they're relentless on the defensive boards. And bringing in guys like Justin Rochlin, who was with a winning program last year in UC San Diego, knows how to win, right? A lot of these players that they brought in know how to win basketball games. Lamar was a winning team last year. They get a transfer from there. So I think you're going to see a much better season from Pacific this year. Is it going to be otherworldly? No, but like they were in a very bad spot heading into this season. They started off really rough. They were 5-13 with their only wins coming against 2 non-D1 schools, San Jose State, who was also in a rough spot, and then Arkansas Pine Bluff and Cal State Fullerton, who were both bad. But then go on the road, get an overtime win against Washington State. They swept Washington State with a 2-point win at home. They had a 2-point win over San Diego. They went on the road and crushed Loyola Marymount. Like they, after the turn of the year, after New Year's, when it was kind of WCC in full swing, January, February, they won some tough games under Smart. I think he's a winning coach, and I think they will have players who can shoot, players who can defend, and we'll just see what the team looks like this year, because it is so differently composed than it was last year.
Yep, it certainly is, and I do think that this team has really taken some strides forward, and I feel like this is being done very much the right way as well. So I do see quite a bit of upside with them, and when it comes to this program, I think that they have proven that they're going to be one of those like top 4, top 5 teams, as Santa Clara has been rock solid in this conference, and they don't bring back the big bomber guys from a season ago, but they bring back some rock solid players. Jake Amundsinger was allergic to scoring, but he was very much a magnet for grabbing rebounds last season. You bring back Elijah Mai, you bring back Brenton Napper as well. These are 2 guys that are very solid from a Santa Clara team that has really become a rock solid offense. They do bring in a few young guys, a few like 7-footers that are a little bit of projects, so they're going to need to get a little bit more out of them. It does feel like a team that might be struggling a little bit with depth, but the guys that they bring back like Napper and company are rock solid, and I think are going to be able to do enough to be able to keep this team towards the top half of the conference.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the one thing you have to talk about when you talk about Herb Sendek and what he's done at Santa Clara is that the lineage of guard play that Santa Clara has had really for the last decade has been unbelievable. You mentioned Napper. He wasn't the guy. He didn't play a ton of minutes, but he can shoot the heck out of the ball. You'll probably have him playing at the point guard spot. But KJ Cochran is a very promising 4-star guard coming in. I think he could probably start from day one. And if he's not starting from day one, he's going to be in that rotation in a big way starting day one. I think that with that duo really being able to play the 1-2 within this rotation, you mentioned the wings, the big men they have down low. They're a team that can beat any team in this conference. And I'm including the top three in that. They're not going to be favored against St. Mary's or Gonzaga, probably even San Francisco, but they have the coaching talent and they have the guard talent again to get hot and make some surprise runs in this conference.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that with this Loyola Marymount team, you said it so well with Herb Semdeck, he's brought guys to the NBA. Like Jalen Williams was on the big stage in the NBA Finals this past year with the OKC Thunder. So guy clearly knows what he's doing there. This is a little bit of an interesting one with Seattle joining the conference. They were supposed to join next year, but the WAC just decided to pretty much disintegrate. So that was great to say the least. But for Seattle, if you look at the conference, they've got a lot of guys that are returning. John Christophilis, who began his career over at Creighton, nice solid player. He's back. Malik Arrington, who began his career over at Idaho State, he's back. Rock solid guard. They have a few question marks down low, but Huron Don is a 6'10" big man that's going to be able to help out. Jun Suk Yu, I believe that he began his career at Gonzaga, just really didn't find a lot of minutes. He's a nice upside guy that comes in internationally. Braden Maldonado has some upside. This team feels like it's got depth. If Brock Felder can give them something down low, I feel like Seattle can come in right away and be towards the middle of this conference.
They're a team that can compete in the middle of this conference. The difference between, and they have experience up and down the board. The difference I see between them and some of these other teams that are relatively guard heavy is Maldonado's really the only guard in this rotation that can shoot. Malik Arrington certainly isn't a shooter. Christofilis likes to shoot. He had one good season with Seattle when he first got there. Last season only shot 29%. If he can get back to, he shot nearly 40% in his first year at Seattle. If he can get to 36, that gives you two. But when you're, who I'm assuming is going to be your star guard in Malik Arrington, is not a shooter, I just worry about the spacing that this guard group is going to give guys like Brock Felder and Huron Dan down low, because there are going to be teams, I feel like they'll bring Maldonado out to the 3-point line, but they might just pack the paint against this team and hope they miss shots, and it'll probably work. So you're right. I think they're going to be competitive in this conference, and I think they'll be right in that Loyola Marymount tier. But I do think that their ceiling is capped until they prove that they can compete with some of these other teams from beyond the arc.
No question about it. I think that that's going to be the biggest question mark with them. And I don't think that there's a lot of question mark as to who a lot of people are going to be picking as the top two. And we'll take a look at the team that a lot of people are going to pick at number two, St. Mary's, who they led the country last year in terms of rebounding. And they don't have quite all their guys back from a season ago, but Paulius Marsoukas, I am bringing him back. That is absolutely massive. And Mikey Lewis, as a sixth man last year, was a really good three-point shooter for the team. They are going to be looking to Tony Duckett for some production. He had some solid minutes over at San Diego last season. Harry Wetzel's a true 7-footer. He was a little bit more of a reserve big man last year. He's going to need to step up. They're rolling the dice on Jazz Gardner, who began his career over at Nevada and Pacific. True 7-footer that never has really lived up to his potential, but at St. Mary's, it feels like they're just a factory of being able to get big men to be able to rebound. I think that St. Mary's, we know what to expect out of them. The defense is going to be amazing, but I think the guy that can really elevate this team is if Mikey Lewis can go from being a reserve to a starter and being able to score in a little bit more volume than he did a season ago.
My concern with St. Mary's is it's about their ability to score, but not about their scoring talent. Paulius Morauskas is an excellent wing scorer. Mikey Lewis showed that he can get hot. I have confidence in Harry Wessels. Maybe not. He's not going to be Mitchell Saxon, and I don't think we can expect him to be Mitchell Saxon. But in the minutes he played, his size overwhelmed a lot of teams. My biggest concern, besides just Mitchell Saxon's versatility at the 5, is you're losing the 2-time WCC Player of the Year, one of the best point guards in the country. He was the engine that made this St. Mary's team go and made this team a really good offensive team in terms of being able to score at a high rate in some of these games, right? You normally talk about St. Mary's, they'll beat you 67-64. They might hit 70. They had probably a half dozen games in WCC play where they hit 80 points. They hit 100 against San Diego. Mikey Lewis, freshman, Liam Campbell, Tony Duckett, they're not point guards. Mikey Lewis is a pure combo guard, pure scoring guard, really. Liam Campbell's more of a combo guard, but he's going to be a freshman. There's not a ton of experience. It's Duckett as a sophomore, Wessels, Lewis, and Morauskas, and then a bunch of either freshmen or like Jazz Gardner unproven talent. For as good as I know Randy Bennett is as a coach, it's how do you replace three seniors in Marshallonis, who is an excellent point guard, two-time WCC Player of the Year, Luke Barrett, who was the ultimate glue guy. He played 94% of their minutes last year because they needed him on the floor. Mitchell Saxton, who could play the 4 or the 5, he could play like that 2 big lineup. And then even Jordan Ross, who was streaky, but he contributed defensively and was a threat to score. That core group of 3 seniors is going to be really difficult to replace. And I feel like the only thing convincing me to put them over San Francisco right now is the fact that Randy Bennett's at the helm. Because if it was just pure talent for talent between these two schools, experience for experience between these two schools, I think you could make a stronger case that the roster right now for San Francisco heading into the year is more trustworthy than this St. Mary's one.
I think that that's so well said by you. With St. Mary's, they do lose a ton from a season ago, but Randy Bennett just feels like that guy always finds a way, and this team always finds a way towards the top of the conference. That would be Gonzaga. They missed the Sweet 16 for the first time in 9 tournaments last year, so you know that they're going to be hungry. They bring back their top scorer, Graham Ike, and I love the guys that are going to be coming in behind them. Jalen Worley missed all of last season. He's one of those glue guys that you were talking about a little bit before, with Luke Barrett being that for St. Mary's. I feel like he could be exactly that for Gonzaga. Adam Miller was much more efficient as a scorer over at Arizona State last year than he has been in the past, and they get guys that are sort of out of sight, out of mind. Steel Venters, the man of steel, who missed the last 2 seasons. He has spent time in the program. He's going to be out there. You had Braden Smith, a rare redshirt, come in after he was a do-it-all guy over at Colgate. Braden Huff is back. This team feels locked and loaded, and there aren't as many people talking about Gonzaga due to how last season went. I feel like this could be an amazing year for the Bulldogs.
There are a couple of things that you are waiting on. Graham Ike obviously is probably going to open the season as the preseason WCC Player of the Year. Adam Miller, if he can continue to be hot from 3, him and Steel Venters are going to space the floor, maybe even more than Gonzaga could last year. Braden Huff, I don't know if Gonzaga is going to rely on that 2 big lineup that they finished the season with, but he and Graham Ike are certainly going to play a lot together. 4 question marks really for me. One is smaller. Emmanuel Innocenti showed a lot of promise last year. If he can become a more reliable shooter or more reliable scorer, his defense is on the wing is fantastic. So I think he's going to be good. Mario St. Superi from Spain is going to play big minutes game 1. I've heard that he's been one of the best, if not the best players on the floor in their summer workouts. 6'3" scoring guard who you're going to play him next to Braden Smith sometimes. You can't play them and Adam Miller, so you might lose some shooting, but it's going to be another small backcourt for Gonzaga. How does that affect their defense? I think the defense on the wing might be a little bit better, so that might make up for it. But the biggest question right now that everyone's waiting for is, does Tyler Grant Foster get his waiver? You're just in wait and see mode. I think the biggest thing working against him is his age. There's going to be a bit of a hesitation to allow a 26-year-old to play an additional season, although you could argue that having a heart issue in game 1 when he was at DePaul is warranted enough to have that be a waiver, but you just don't know. And that takes a lot of the depth and maybe takes away the one player on this team that you can kind of give the ball to and have him muscle his way for a basket. And then Braden Smith, right? Gonzaga's been blessed with excellent point guards, especially passing point guards the last decade. And Braden Smith, all of last year, and then into the summer, you've heard good things about him, but you just don't know how he's going to perform in this Gonzaga offense until you see it on the floor. If he is even close to what you got from the Nemhards, what you got from Suggs, what you got from Josh Perkins, this is going to be a fantastic offense. You're just going to have to see. But I think right now they're the clear favorite to win the WCC. They have the most talent on this roster. Honestly, the most continuity of key pieces, right? You've got Graham Ike, you have Huff, Worley, and Smith have both been in the system. They haven't played, but they've both been in the system. Innocenti obviously is returning. This Gonzaga team is going to be really good, but there are still a lot of moving pieces with this roster that could determine whether they are second weekend capable or whether they're just kind of the favorite to win this conference.
Absolutely. But you're always one of our favorites, Connor. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
We're going to start at Heat Check looking into season previews for next year. So those should be coming out sometime in the next month and a half. But just continuing to grind and put out more stuff on Heat Check in the coming months. It's been tough. I have a 3-week-old in the house. So it's been a very hectic couple of months. And then just continuing to put things out on Twitter as more information from the WCC, the Mountain West come in terms of whether Tyron Grant Foster gets his waiver and what coaches have said about their rotations and stuff like that. So we're all in wait and see mode because the season is less than 2 months away.
Good lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Was great to be joined by Connor Hope in the last segment. He does such an incredible job over at eCheck CBB. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball. He has joined me the last few years for this WCC Conference Preview Edition. Every single time he does, he lends such great insights. He delivered once again today. So big thanks to Connor for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector finish for the WCC. Once again, if I miss any news or notes from college basketball over the weekend, I plan on posting this most likely for Sunday morning. It might go up Saturday, but whatever day I do post this, if I miss any news and notes from the previous 24 hours, those will be recapped on the next podcast, so have no fear there. We're going to get you guys all covered there, but I do want these to be evergreen podcasts to where if you're listening to this podcast in mid-September, you get great insights. If you're listening to it in early October, late October, just any time for the run-up for the season, you're going to be able to be informed. So how about if we do take a look at my number 12 team, dead last in my projector finish, I do have to go with Pepperdine. Just a lot of new pieces, and we were talking about it with Connor. You just don't have a lot of experience that comes back for Pepperdine. You've got Javon Cooley, who missed the entirety of the 2024-25 season, and I mean, if he can go back to shooting 47.5% from three like he did at Marist, that'd be great. He was averaging 7.5 points, 4 rebounds per game 2 seasons ago. Yeah, Nathan Levy, he comes on over from the country of Turkey, and in his small sample size with UW Green Bay, actually shows the promise. At 6'9", he was able to shoot it okay from three-point range, 8.6 boards, 2.5 assists per game, so there's versatility there. And then the 6'10" big man and Danilo Dozic, really the main guy returning from last year, shot 34% from three, but there's not a lot of depth with this team. Styles Phipps, who couldn't get out there on the floor for Grand Canyon, he's going to look to help out a team that was 302nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that it's going to be a long year for the Wave, so I do have them at number 12 in terms of my projector finish. At number 11, I'm going to be going with Portland. This team was number 303 in the country in terms of rebound percentage and 346th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Shante Leggins, when he came over from Eastern Washington, really had things rocking and rolling in that first year or so, and well, he just doesn't have any of his guys anymore. Now he's going to be looking to likes of a Jay Alvarez, who was an okay scorer over at Ryder, but Ryder was a sub-500 team out there in the Metro Atlantic. This is a step up in competition. They're going to need him to be able to do a lot of good things. Riley Parker was solid over at St. Francis, Pennsylvania. He was able to shoot 39.5% from 3, 13 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, but once again, now you're stepping up from the NEC. You're having to go up to this level of competition. That's going to be a little bit of an issue for him as well. You got Jermaine Balsager-Webb, who's staying 7'1", hasn't necessarily been able to find his footing at the Division I ranks. I do think that there's a little bit of upside with him. And then you got Mateus Ronsky, hopefully I said that correct, coming in from Duquesne, guy that just never really was able to find his footing at Duquesne, but has a little bit of upside. And then Micah Ballou, he's back from a season ago. He was able to give you about 5 points per contest, but not really a guy that was able to light it up from three-point range or anything like that. Just very bearish on this Portland team. It felt like Shante Leggins had something going, just has not been able to formulate. So I do have them in my projector finish down here at number 11. At number 10, I'm going to be going with Pacific. Now, I do think that Pacific has quite a bit of upside. This is going to be a much better team than they were a season ago, where they were outside the top 250 and darn near everything, 314th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Alexis Marmayolis, he comes on over from Lamar, where he was averaging 14.5 points, 3.5 boards, a steal, 2.5 assists. So, and he was rock solid, shooting 38.5% from three. TJ Wainwright was a 40.5% three-point shooter over at Long Beach State. Jaden Clayton, he's a guy that was able to be just a nice mixer and shaker, stealing half per contest over at Maine. I have my big issues with this team down low. Now, Casey Ibikwe, he was a starter for Oregon State a few seasons ago, where he was averaging about like 4 boards, 5 points at a block per contest, so he'll give you a bit of something. And Justin Rochlin, he was a part of that UC San Diego team that made the NCAA tournament last year, actually began his career at Oregon State as well, 6.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. A little bit of upside there, but Don Capriati, is he going to be the three-point shooter that we saw over at Houston Christian a few seasons ago? I do think that Dave Smart, who comes on over from the country of Canada, where he was coaching at Carleton College, I think that he's got some things that make you feel relatively good about this team, but I think that it's going to take a little bit of time for these guys to be able to gel. So I've got Pacific at number 10 in my projector or finish. A lot of people are going to look at me sideways for this, but at number 9, I'm going with Loyola Marymount. You've got Jan Vide back, who was able to give the team 6.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest, but they have to replace all their top 5 scorers from a season ago. Now, I like Tanner Thomas. Tanner Thomas, over at Sacred Heart last year, 14.5 points, 6 boards, 37.5% three-point shooter. He was 6'5" plus. Nikhil Shelton, nice go-to scorer over at Eastern Illinois, 17 points, 4.5 boards. Ronnie Brown is a guy that's able to pop it from Virginia Tech, but I do have a little bit of a fear of the depth with this team. Rockets Josias, he comes on over after he just couldn't get out there on the floor at Central Florida last year. When he was at LaSalle 2 years ago, 8.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's got some size at 6'10", shot 38.5% from three, but there's a lot of question mark, in my opinion. Jalen Shelley, a former top 100 recruit according to 247 Sports, who was over at USC. What is he going to be able to give you? Aaron McBride, he's going to be looking to take some strides forward, and for Loyola Marymount, just not returning much of anything from a season ago, does have me quite bearish on this team. So I've got them lower than most people. I've got Loyola Marymount here at number 9 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 8, I am going to be going with Washington State. With Washington State, they're going to need to hope that Thomas Thrasterson is going to be able to build off of what he was able to do last season. For Thrasterson, he had himself a relatively solid season, but that said, he really saw his minutes towards back half of the season. Like in non-conference play, he was more of a reserve. He was behind a lot of those guys like Nate Calmenzi and company, but just due to the injuries that happened to Isaiah Watts, Cedric Coward and company, he got thrusted into a little bit more action. In conference play, he was averaging about 5.5 points per contest and shot 47.5% from three, albeit on low volume. I think they took like 20 overall threes last season, but hey, you know what? There's a little bit of upside there. Richard Vavers is a guy that has a bit of upside as well, 5.5 points per contest. I know he dealt with some injury last season as well, but being able to bring in something like a Casey Jones, I think is big. He played with David Riley when he was over at Eastern Washington. For Casey Jones, missed the entirety of the 2024-25 campaign, and last we saw him, he was averaging 12.5 points, shot 34.5% from three, 4 boards, a steal per contest, so nice stat sheet suffer at 6'6". That's really going to be able to elevate this team, and I just think that Riley in general is a good coach. They bring in a guy that I think is going to be able to fit the system really well in Andy Okafor, guy that's saying 6'9", began his career over at Cal, really didn't see a lot of minutes over there at Cal. I think that season number 2 in this system is going to serve him well. And then Jerome Morton, who was able to average 10.5 points, 3.5 assists over at Morehead State, should be able to help this team out because they were outside the top 300 in terms of ball security. Also shot 37.5% from three. I think that Washington State has some upside in that backcourt, and I do think that Okafor helps them out down low as well. So I have Washington State at number 8 in terms of my projector finish. At number 7, I'm going to be going with San Diego. San Diego just brings in too much talent for me to deny. And I do think that Steve Lavin still knows how to coach a game of basketball. Like, you don't coach at St. John's and you don't coach at UCLA on accident. Dominique Bilford Tuff is a guy that I really like. 14.5 points. He was able to shoot about 32% from three last season. Also about 90% at the free throw line. So you do love to be able to see that for San Diego. Much of the roster from last season is new look, but they do bring back KJ Bradley, who when he was out there on the floor, he was the team's best player last year. In his 20 games played, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists. Didn't necessarily pop it well from three, but 1.7 steals per contest, one of the few guys that really play defense, albeit the 3.5 turnovers per game. He's going to need to clean those up a little bit, but I mean, you've got Hassan Diop. He comes on over from Colorado where he was able to see some minutes as a stretch big man. Tunari Lane was a nice double-figure scorer last season when he was over at Georgia State. He was pretty rock solid when he was over at Winthrop as well. So you've got a lot of guys that stand like 6'5", 6'6" that are interesting. Bradley is Rosario, as well as a guy that began his career over at Georgetown and UAB. He should be able to give this team a little bit more defense and a little bit more rebounding as well. Spend a little bit of time at St. Louis as well. I believe that he's on school number 5 at this point. But hey, I mean, at UAB last season was a solid reserve, 7 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Not a guy that's going to pop it and lock it from 3, but gives this team a little bit more of a low post presence than what they've had in the past. So I do think that San Diego, the arrow is sticking upward for them. I do have them at number 7 in terms of my projector finish. At number 6, I'm going to be going with Seattle. With Seattle, I love the chemistry that is coming back for the team. Now, you do lose Matthew Alexander Moncrief, who was a little bit of a heart and soul piece from a season ago, but Brayden Maldonado is back. 9 points, about 1.5 steals per contest, shot 39% from 3. And this is a Seattle team that they're just built on defense. This is an offense that last year, let's call it what it is. It wasn't great. We talked about it with Connor Ope. The fact that their three-point shooting was in the bottom half of all of college basketball, and that's putting it very politely. 277th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but when Seattle really hummed when they were out there in the WAC, there were times where that was a top 50 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Last year, it was a little bit more herky-jerky, touch and go, but they were still 43rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for this Red Hawks team, I do think that Malik Arrington is going to do a nice job of being able to shoulder the load with 7.5 points, 4.5 assists, 2.2 steals per contest. Not a guy that's really going to pop it and lock it from 3. And John Chrysofilis is 28.5% three-point shooting last year. I feel like that was a little bit of an aberration. I think that he's not going to shoot it as badly as he did last year. 2 years ago, he shot 39.8% from 3. I think that he's somewhere between A and B, more of a 35% three-point shooter. But I mean, with the Seattle team having back so many guys from season ago, I think is going to be really big for them. They're a team that's built around defense. They are a team that's going to be a little bit, shall we say, shaky with regards to the outside shooting, but John Suck-Yo is a nice upside guy that comes on over from Gonzaga. Huron Don is someone that stands 6'10"ish. He's going to be able to give this team a little bit of rough and tumble down low. He was able to find his footing towards the back half of the season as a defensive stopper and Brockfelder last season over at Southern Utah. 6+ rebounds per game. I think that this team does a great job being a bull constrictor and utilizing their defense to climb up this conference. So number 6 in my projector finish, going to be going Seattle. And number 5, I'm going with Santa Clara because Santa Clara does lose a lot of pieces from a season ago. So you have a few rolls of the dice with this team. Elijah Mai is back after he was able to give the team 11 points, 2.5 assists per contest, and I think that he's going to take great strides forward. Shot 43.5% from three-point range last season. Brenton Napper off the bench was able to be a 43% three-point shooter. He was able to give the team 6 points per contest. You have to think that Mai is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit this season, but when it comes to this Santa Clara team, you actually do have a very sure-handed rebounder in Jake Amundsinger. For Amundsinger, he was allergic to scoring 3 points per contest, but 5.5 rebounds, and he did actually pass it well as a big man as well, with about 1.9 assists per game, so that's something that you do feel relatively good about. KJ Cochran is a highly touted freshman that should be able to give this backcourt a little bit of something, but you do have to have your question marks with regards to some of the depth of this team. Chris Taggio is going to be a little bit of an upside guy that comes in from Iowa. What are you going to be able to get out of him? Down low, Francis, I'm going to say this last name incorrectly, Chuka Wablu. He's 6'10". He's a pretty highly touted freshman, but again, a guy that hasn't seen minutes at the college basketball level, so we've got some question marks there. Greg Norman, he comes on over from the Big Ten after he was just glued to the bench over at Michigan State, so we've got question marks there now. We've seen guys glued to the bench in the Big Ten come in, and they've become first-round draft picks, so there's that aspect of things with Santa Clara as well, but I do have a few question marks with them losing so much of last year's team, so I did have to put Santa Clara at number 5 in terms of my projector finish. At number 4, I'm going with Oregon State. Now, Oregon State loses a ton from last year, but they are going to be retaining Josiah Lake along with Isaiah Sy, and I absolutely love the game of Des White. Des White over the last 2 seasons was really a go-to sort of do-it-all gadget guy, both at Missouri State along with Austin Peay. I recognize not necessarily the most winning of cultures, but that's it at Missouri State. About 14 points, 2.5 assists, a steal per contest, shot 37% from three-point range. You absolutely love to see that. Oregon State is very much built around their three-point shooting, is very much built around just versatility in general, and being able to have a guy like Cy Back who was able to give you 5.5 points, shot 34% from three-point range, I think is relatively rock solid. Josiah Lake shot 37% from 3. He was able to pour in there a little bit over 2 assists, a steal per contest, so he could be able to help out in terms of helping facilitate the offense. defense, as I think that you're going to have multiple ball handlers on this team. Noah Ammenhauser, who comes on over from Coastal Carolina, he stands more than 7 feet tall. He was able to give that team 6+ rebounds per game last season. Or Diaz Graham comes on over from Pittsburgh after, and he was glued to the bench a little bit there, but he's a little bit of an upside guy. Malcolm Christie wasn't a great three-point shooter over at Oakland, but Oakland just wasn't able to find him some open shots at the D2 ranks. He was a relatively good three-point shooter. I think that this system is going to allow him more open looks in general. And then Stephen Olawani, who comes on over from Southern Indiana, 14 points, 7 boards. He's going to be able to give this team some rough and tumble down low. I think that Wayne Tinkle is so rock solid coach, and I think that he's starting to find some talent with this team. I've got old Oregon State over at my projector finish at number 4. Number 3, I'm going to be going with the Dons of San Francisco. As for the Dons, they just have been a consistent, solid team in this conference over the last few seasons. And for the Dons, I love Tyrone Riley and what he showed as a freshman last year. 9.5 points, 6 boards per contest, shot in the low 30s from 3, but was able to chip in there like a steal per contest as well. And we saw the rise of Ryan Beasley towards back half of the season, and I'm so glad that our good friend and Connor Hope was able to mention that. Overall for the season, was able to give the team only about 30% three-point shooting, 9 points, 2.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. But you take a look at what he was able to do in the back half of the season. We're going to go with the final 12 games of the season, and that's where he was really able to take off. Final 12 games of the season, he was averaging 13.2 points per contest. The three-point shooting was more around about 32%. He was able to give out 3 assists, 2 steals per 1.2 steals per contest. I think that he's going to be able to take some strides forward in this backcourt as well. And when it comes to San Francisco, certainly you're going to be missing those guys like a Malik Thomas from a season ago. But still, this is a San Francisco team that I just feel like they've been able to form a little bit of a chemistry in terms of being able to play really good defense, not allow wide open looks from three-point range. Vukasin Masic was a rock-solid player over at Portland last season at 6'5", that's able to pop up from 3. He's going to be able to give you some good production. And Mookie Cook, I do think, is a bit of an upside guy as well. Is a former, according to some rankings, 50 recruit. He was unable to get out there on the floor at Oregon last season, but at 6'7", he's a guy that could really develop. And then you got Nadio Newberry, who was limited to 11 games last season, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, a little bit of statue suffer when he was out there last year. 2 years ago as a starter for the Dons, where he was averaging more like 9.5 points per contest and shot 40% from three-point range at 6'7". I think that the Dons have themselves a nice season, and I think that they could be a sleeper for perhaps an at-large bid. I've got them number 3 in my projector finish. At number 2, they might not have as much talent at San Francisco, but I just can't quit the St. Mary's team. With St. Mary's, sure, they're going to be looking at an upside guy in Jazz Johnson, hoping to be able to get jazzy on these guys. But that said, you've got Paulius Marsoukas, who's able to give you 12 points, 7.5 boards per contest. He's going to be rock solid down low. Harry Wetzels, whenever he got minutes, he was so good at 7+ feet tall. He's able to give you a lot of production down low. Mikey Lewis was a really good three-point shooter last season. He, during conference play, shot 42.2% from 3 in conference play, 8 points per contest. It took him a little bit of time to be able to find his sea legs, but he was able to do so. Now, a very fair question was brought up. What are you going to be able to get in terms of point guard spot over at St. Mary's? I do think that Randy Bennett is going to be able to figure that out. I think that you're going to be able to get a little bit of production out of the freshman like a Liam Campbell. I think he's going to step in. He's going to be playing big minutes right away for this team. Tony Duckett is someone that comes on over from San Diego as well, was playing within the conference. He knows the landscape very well, and I think that Duckett could be a nice little bit of a do-it-all sort of player after last season over at San Diego. He was able to give out about 2 assists, 10.5 points, shot 34% from 3 at 6'5". So I do have St. Mary's, a team that is just always one of the best in terms of defense, number 1 in terms of rebound percentage last season, and number 2 in my projector finish. Number 1, it's the Ric Flair mentality. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man, and Gonzaga is right now the man. They missed the Sweet 16 for the first time in 9 NCAA tournaments, and I think that they're getting back there. Graham Ike, 17.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest. You've got Jalen Worley, who missed all of last season due to injury. He's a nice glue guy. 7.5 points, 3 assists at 6'7". He's able to give you a bit over a steal per contest. Just a really nice offensive stopper, as Gonzaga might be playing better defense than ever before. With this Gonzaga team, you've just got so many guys that are going to have buy-in. You've got Steel Venters, a man of steel. He missed last 2 seasons due to injury. You know that he's going to be out for blood. 16 points, 3.5 boards on 40% three-point shooting last we saw him a few seasons ago. Adam Miller shot 43% from 3 last season over at Arizona State, and then you'll bring in a guy from Colgate that redshirted last year. I mean, how many times do you see an optional redshirt in this day and age? Brayton Smith did that. 12 points, 5.5 boards, 5.5 assists, 2 steals per contest over at Colgate. Brandon Huff is back. He was averaging 11 points per contest at 6'10". Now, Ty and Graham Foster may or may not be in the fold for this team, but even if they don't have Ty and Graham Foster, this team is still going to be number one in terms of the WCC. The only question with Ty and Graham Foster is, can this team be like a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament, or do they fall a little bit short as Foster? He's a do-it-all guy. Didn't shoot it well from 3 last year, but 15 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, 1.5 blocks, 1.7 steals per contest. He really elevates this team, gives them such good versatility, and I do think that it's another big year for Gonzaga. I've got them number one in terms of my projector finish, and that'll wrap things up for the WCC Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Connor Ope, does amazing work over at eCheck CBB. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM. Naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. Every single conference is getting a conference preview as well. We're down to the Power 5 conferences along with the American and the Atlantic 10. So the going's getting good. The rest of them are already posted up. So we've got you guys covered there, and I'll have you guys covered with a fresh podcast tomorrow. Appreciate you tuning in today, and I will be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.